I guess we should have known that everyone who signs up to work for Donald Trump is signing up for one single project, and that is the transition of American democracy to a kind of kleptocratic oligarchy in which the billionaires rule, in which they get to steal from regular Americans. And if that's the domestic project, then the way that you normalize that kind of government is to associate yourself with similar governments abroad, like the Kremlin. So it's all part of one big domestic project. The foreign policy, the affection for dictatorships abroad is, in effect, a means towards transitioning our democracy to something very, very different, something we've never, ever seen before in this country.
Mr. Ambassador, that is all true. But the amazing thing about Putin and Russia, and it almost sets itself up like a bad joke, and I'm not a comedian, but how bad is he? He's so bad that even Donald Trump's massive propaganda arm, it starts at Fox News, but it has tentacles throughout radio and the internet and Elon Musk's company, cannot change this stubborn number, 81%. 81% of all Americans right now, today, do not like or trust Vladimir Putin. And that's after 9 years of this project that I think Chris Murphy accurately describes. Doesn't mean they'll give up, but what should people be prepared for in terms of trying to turn what is hardened and correct distrust and dislike for Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think the first comment I would make is the American people, at least 81%, have a better understanding of Russia and the threat that Putin poses than the president apparently does. You know, we've seen over the last 3 or 4 weeks what I would call concession after concession after concession to Moscow. So already 3 weeks ago, the president and the secretary of defense are talking about, well, Ukraine can't get its territory back. It can't join NATO. So before the president even has the Russians and the Ukrainians at the negotiating table, he's already making 2 big concessions to the Russians' view. For the last 3 years, there's been a Western agreement that we will isolate and boycott Putin, and then Trump agrees to meet with Putin. And then we had this, it's already been mentioned, the vote at the United Nations where we joined Russia, North Korea, and Iran to vote against a UN resolution because it mentioned Russia as the aggressor. And I look at this and I say, what has the United States received in return? And I can't see a single thing. And I fear that Trump is going about it all wrong in negotiating with Putin. Putin looks at the White House now and he sees weakness. And he's not inclined to make any concessions because he can just sit back and see what tomorrow will bring, and maybe there'll be another gift. This is not working even in the terms of President Trump's own professed goal, which is to try to find an end to the Russia-Ukraine war, because Russia sees no reason whatsoever to move. You know, President Trump heads the most powerful country in the world. He has leverage that he could impose on Putin to inflict costs if Putin continues this war. And thus far, for reasons that are very hard to understand, he's not chosen to use that leverage.
Peter Baker, a lot has been made of Trump's affinity, not just for Putin, but for the manosphere. It includes a bunch of men who look like Dan Bongino and Joe Rogan. I don't know who they all are, but the masculinity seems to be the beginning, the middle, and the end of all their stories. Here's how weak the Republicans and Trump look in front of their own voters. This is a caller to the Mark Levin radio show, and some voters in a Trump district, a district Trump won 52-47.
One thing that's really disturbed me today is all the people who are blaming Zelensky like he's the problem, like he's the villain in this story. And he's not. It's Putin. I mean, Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine did not invade Russia. And I am just perplexed at all these people who are saying that Zelensky's a crook or that Ukraine wants war.
Listen, everybody's freaking out. Everybody's like, you know, I'm Mr. Like, let's work together. Let's try and find common ground. And what happened in the White House yesterday, I was so pissed off that it was just I knew you had to get that out of your system. I wanted you to get that out of your system.
So, Peter, the point there, the man getting a standing ovation in a district Trump won 52-47, not a Republican, not a Trump cabinet member, not a man from the manosphere, but a Democrat.
Look, I think that it reminds us how people felt about the Ukraine war when the full-fledged invasion happened in 2022. Remember, Americans all across the board flew Ukrainian blue and yellow flags. There was a great deal of empathy and sympathy on the part of the American people for a nation that was invaded unprovoked, let's be honest about that, by its more powerful neighbor, simply because the more powerful neighbor's leader says it doesn't deserve to be an independent nation. Remember that, by the way, when you hear Russians or people who are sympathetic to Russia say it's really all about NATO expansion, Vladimir Putin wrote a 5,000-word treatise in July of 2021 saying, Ukraine historically is not an independent nation, doesn't deserve to be an independent nation. This is not about whether it's a member of NATO. It doesn't deserve to be on the map, as far as Vladimir Putin is saying. And Americans felt that at the time. Americans felt like the way they did when, the Nazis were invading Poland and so forth. Now, that doesn't mean that they want to necessarily spend, hundreds of billions of dollars, if that's what it comes to. There's certainly a part of America that is tired of being involved in other people's wars, and Trump taps into that sort of feeling. But there's a difference between that and suddenly taking sides with Vladimir Putin. That's not something that Americans have historically been in favor of. Just yesterday, I think CBS came out with a poll of YouGov showing that of those who had a choice, 55%, I think, said they prefer Ukraine over Russia. Only 4% said Ukraine, and 44%, I may have those numbers wrong, but something in that range, didn't take a position one way or the other. So a lot of people don't want to be involved. But if they do have a position, they're 10-1 in favor of Russia. Ukraine.
Ukraine. Here's the poll number I have. A lot of this Trump has made about spending. And even on spending, 65% of all Americans in the latest NPR PBS Marist poll say that we've either spent the right amount or not enough aiding our ally, Ukraine, in the war against Russia. 34% say we spent too much. Here's my question, and it's about politics. The cuts, not popular. Siding with Russia, 81% of all Americans don't like Russia very much. Inflation going the wrong direction. The stock market going the wrong direction. Trump has not kept a promise other than putting all the pieces in place for retribution and I guess dropping the case against Eric Adams, but I didn't hear him mention that in his stump speech very often. What is happening politically?
Well, it's interesting because people are still saying that he's doing what he said he would do. And I think primarily that's probably around immigration.
Deportations.
Because they're trying to do this big show, like they're really taking out people. And they're not removing anywhere near the number of people that they said they would remove on day one. And the other thing that's interesting politically is he's picked a fight with Canada. Now, keep in mind that Canada has intercepted more fentanyl coming across their border from the United States than we have coming from Canada. So he tried to blame Canada and say, well, you're not doing anything about drugs coming across our border. Meanwhile, Russia allows cyber criminals to operate with impunity in Russia. You don't think that Vladimir Putin can go in and murder all these cyber criminals that are shutting down hospitals in the United States? They're impacting manufacturing companies. They are doing cyber warfare. Russian actors are doing cyber warfare today in our country. Ask anybody in the intelligence community and they will tell you that. But for some reason, Donald Trump is not bothered by Russia letting their criminals wreak havoc with some of our most important institutions that deliver important services to America, but he picks a fight with Canada. Now, all of these chickens are going to come home to roost. And I'm using chickens because Easter's coming and everybody's not going to be able to decorate that many eggs because they're not going to be able to afford it. So eggs have become a symbol of Trump's failure, but it's one of many, and it's going to take a while. It will take 6 months, maybe a year. But if this continues the way it's going, there will not be good midterms for the Republican Party.
Is that the Democrats thinking that they need 6 months to a year to really mount a robust?
Well, I think the Democrats' thinking is probably no different than your thinking or my thinking. Horrified, feeling somewhat helpless, depressed. This is really a time where there's not one leader And so everyone's looking to people to rise up from a phoenix from the ashes, one figure that will lead us out of the desert and take on Donald Trump effectively. That will happen in time. But for now, I think the Democrats have to be disciplined about staying on the message of affordability and that your government is here to serve you. And if your government can't serve you because you can't get in the parks, you can't get your question answered by the IRS, you can't get your mother's Social Security check straightened out, that will all now be blamed on Donald Trump, not the deep state.